Welcome back to another edition of Where's the Teaspoon? Today we are chatting to Melanie Dakin, who is an executive PA here in DCHS. And last year, Mel had a very exciting adventure, which she's going to tell us all about. So, welcome to the podcast, Mel. Thank you for sparing us some time to have a chat.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Mel, tell us what you did last year.
So last year I decided to ask my boss if I could have a career break. And this came around because I'd not had a very good year in 2022. I'd had a breast cancer diagnosis. I needed surgery. Um, Whilst I was recovering from my surgery, my great aunt died, so I'd got a funeral to try and arrange whilst I was doing my own recovery. Um, my surgery took a little bit longer to recover from. I'd told my team that I would be away from work just for a couple of weeks, and then the weeks spread on, and I ended up being away from work for about 6 months. And then I returned to work in September. When I came back to work, that was a bit of a shock, I think, having had the 6 months off. And then in the December of that year, I lost my dad. So it was just, and it made me sit back and reevaluate and look about things that had gone off. It makes you look at life slightly differently.
Yeah.
So I asked Michelle if I could have a career break and take a bit of time for me.
Yeah. At that stage, had you had in mind what you wanted to do, or was it something that you obviously had a horrific year, and I'm really sorry about all that. I mean, it's terrible, terrible things to contend with all at once. Did you know what you needed to do? Did you know you needed travel, or was it just a mental break from
I think it was just
life?
the mental break. I think
Mm,
we'd been out walking the dog, and it was like, surely there's got to be something more to life than this.
mm,
And I thought about all the things that I wanted to do that I'd not done, places I wanted to see that I'd not seen, go to places that I'd not been to before. And a career break just seemed the ideal opportunity to take a bit of time out and go and do those things.
yeah. And what was the response from your team and your manager? It's that Michelle Bateman, isn't it? When you refer to Michelle, yeah,
Yeah, so it's Michelle
yeah.
Bateman, but I do also support Ben Pearson, our medical director.
Mm,
So I'd asked for time to speak to Michelle, and I'd not even finished asking the question if I could take the time out for a career break. And she'd already said, yes, yes, by all means,
yeah.
you know, entirely support that. I went back to my team and said to my team that this is what I was thinking about. And because they'd been
Mm,
so good in managing whilst I'd been off as part of my recovery,
yeah,
then I felt as though it was an ideal opportunity, I think, to be able to take that time out and go and do the things that I needed to go and do.
yeah. So is that when the planning stage came into effect? Is that when you started planning?
Well, I think that I'd already sown the seed, possibly when I came back to work in the September. I think, the diagnosis and losing my great aunt was enough to already start to think about what could I do.
Mm,
And I think losing my dad was just the topper. And it was like, no, I really do need to go and do something. And then it seemed to all snowball quite quickly. I'd got set in my mind that the 1st of May would be a good date to go and do these things. I like things to
yeah.
be a bit organised. So 1st of May was a in my mind, a good date to go. But then I did need a spell at Resolve to try and deal with, because I felt guilty. I felt really, really guilty about taking the, oh, it's going to make me cry.
It's okay. It's all right to cry.
Mm. I felt guilty
So,
about leaving my
mm,
mum and
mm,
my siblings, and I felt it was almost like I was going away and doing something celebratory when really it was actually quite a sad time in my life.
yeah,
I'd had a couple of conversations with Michelle, and Michelle said, I think you need to go and seek some external support to help you make this decision.
yeah,
And so I did. I had a couple of sessions with Resolve to help formulate what me being away, and I suppose giving me the permission to go.
yeah.
I needed somebody to say, actually, yes, you can go and do this, and you can go and do it for you. So I
So the
did.
resolve sessions were helpful for you then?
Yes, they were. They were.
Yeah.
And as much as I talked about going and wanting to go and do this trip, it took me a long time to actually book the ferry tickets. I think it
Mm,
was only a month before we went that I gave myself permission to go and book the ferry tickets and make it final.
yeah. So you had planned a camper van trip around Europe. Are you a camper vanner already? Were you a camper vanner already?
We'd
Uh,
not. We bought the camper van with the intentions of going and doing this trip.
yeah.
Bit
Had you driven one
extreme.
before?
No,
Yeah.
no. And I had all these great plans that, yes, I would drive the van in Europe and I was going to do this. But then when I saw how many of the Europeans drive, I decided that actually, no, I would be the navigator and stay in the passenger side.
So tell us who else was on board this trip with you?
So on this trip was my partner Nick and our dog Flossie. She's a golden retriever. She doesn't travel the best, um, but I think once we arrived at our destinations, then she realised that she was there and she was with us, and everything was fine. But yeah, I think the biggie for us was leaving her in the van on the ferry because she wasn't allowed onto the ferry with us.
Oh, okay. Oh, how long was that for? How long did she have to stay in the van on her own?
Well, I didn't realise, and I did the longer ferry crossing. So we'd got a 2 hour ferry crossing trip, and so
Mm,
she was in the van. I'm quite sure she slept the whole of the way through it. She's got a bed and she'd got her
yeah,
treats and everything that she needed. So I
yeah.
think she was. I think I was far more worried than she was, but yeah, she was fine.
So give us a snapshot of what that period involved. What countries did you go to? Where did you travel? And what did
Oh,
you do?
so as I say, we set off on the 1st of May. Um, we'd got all our paperwork. Can you believe it? The dog needs more paperwork than we do. So we'd had to get all her paperwork done and organised. And believe it not, she can actually stay in Europe for longer than we can. So due to the Schengen rules, we could only stay in Europe for 3 months, but Flossie could stay for 4. So
But she decided to come back with you.
she did decide that she wanted to come back with us. She didn't want to stay on her own. So my partner Nick, he's a keen cyclist. So a lot of our year at home is watching the cycling on the TV and things. And we thought the trip would be a great opportunity to see the 3 world cycling tours all in 1 year. So
Yeah.
that's the Giro d'Italia, the Tour de France, and the Vuelta d'España. So we started our trip in Dieppe. We travelled from there to Luxembourg. Nick just happened to find a cycling museum in Luxembourg that we just bowled up at a place, and he said, "Oh, I'm just going for coffee." And there
How
was a cycling
convenient.
museum. Yes, just happened upon it.
Yeah.
So I think cycling made a big, it was a big part of the trip. and the plan was to slowly make our way down to Italy so that we could see part of the Giro d'Italia.
Mm.
I did have a bucket list. So we did the Romantic Road in Germany. We saw Neuschwanstein, which is something that I'd wanted to see from the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang movies.
Yes, yeah,
I wanted to say that I could stay, we'd stayed in the Black Forest. So
yeah.
we had a camping trip in the Black Forest, which was a bit scary because it was
Was
dark.
it? Yeah.
Um, I wanted to see Lake Geneva. I wanted to say that I'd been to Lake Como. Um, we were able to see Mont Blanc. I did want to do the Mont Blanc tunnel, but when I realised how much it would be to take a camper van through the Mont Blanc tunnel, we decided to go over the top because it was
Okay,
rather
right.
expensive. So um, there were a couple of places on my bucket list that we couldn't see. I'd wanted to go to Florence and I'd wanted to go to Vernazza. Not really taken into account that having a 7 metre motorhome doesn't really make it very easy to get to some of these places. So our motorhome wouldn't have made it to Vernazza, or we might have made it there, but we might not have made it out again. So it was, yeah, we managed to cross a lot off our bucket list, and seeing the cycling, that actually seeing the cycling live, I think, having seen them for years on the TV, but then seeing the atmosphere at a finish on a Giro d'Italia route was just, yeah, out of
Mm.
this world. Wouldn't have changed anything for anything. It was just fabulous.
How did you find van life? Did it get claustrophobic? Were there any challenges?
No, not really. I think once we'd got to Switzerland and the weather had started to improve,
Mm.
we didn't really spend an awful lot of time in the van. We'd done a couple of trial trips in the UK before we'd set off. So we were fully equipped, and there are some girls' necessities that you need. So they were all there, and I'd got a comfy bed and mattress toppers, and as daft as it sounds, I'd got my feather duvet. So
Yeah, you
we were.
need your comforts.
Oh yeah. So no, it wasn't claustrophobic. And most
Mm.
days where you're out of the van, you're seeing the sights. So and
Mm.
we've got all our cooking utensils in the van, and it really is just a home from home.
Yeah. What was, when you look over that period, what was the highlight or the highlights plural for you?
I think the fact that we were able to go and do the trip together, the three of us, to go and
Mm.
see the beautiful sights that are on offer in Europe was just an absolute high. I mean, some of the views are spectacular and breathtaking, and you take your photographs, but they're just not the same as seeing it in real life, doing the daft things, in Switzerland, running down the mountains, singing The Hills Are Alive, extremely out of key. Was it, yeah, it was just,
Mm.
and being able to cross some things off your bucket list that you wouldn't ordinarily get to do, I think was
Mm.
just, yeah, the highlights of, and just spending that time together, because normally you have a week's holiday, or you've got a long weekend. Or I did tell my team that if I came back on my own, then Nick was in a ravine in the Alps, but he managed to survive. I did bring him home. So yes, we are
Do you
we
think
are
it
still.
was, sorry, Mel, do you think it was good for your relationship? Do you think it strengthened it to have that time together?
Yeah, I do. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not newbies. We have been together for almost 20 years. So we're not
Mm.
newbies, but I do think it was a great opportunity to spend that time together, and
Mm.
quality time.
Yeah. Yeah.
None
What
of the
memories? Yeah.
Oh yes, definitely.
Were there any low points in the trip?
I think the lowest trip. So our camper van is an old camper van. It's not a new one. She's 22 years old. So she'd been all the way down to Italy, she'd been across Italy, she'd been up the Alps, she'd been down the Alps. We'd driven back across France, and then she decided to break down at the ferry terminal as we'd handed
Oh,
over our passports and all our paperwork. So we were booked
oh,
on to our ferry, but she wouldn't start.
oh
So
no.
we had to sit and wait. So I had to phone the Green Flag in the UK to get a engineer to come out and have a look at the car, have a look at the van at
Yeah.
the ferry port. And we sat there and waved our ferry goodbye. I think
Oh.
had that happened earlier on in the trip, I would have been quite stressy and it would have been a
Mm,
real calamity. But I think because we were so chilled, it was the end of our first trip that we just
mm.
sat there and had our picnic, waited,
Yeah.
waited for the mechanic to arrive. So, yeah, I think that was the low point, but
It's
we got it
interesting,
going.
isn't it? What you if your baseline stress level is different, how you react to things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you came back to the UK, but you still had a bit of time of leave. So what did you do then?
Well, the plan had been that we would go and do the Atlantic Way in Ireland. Um, but I don't know, we didn't feel ready for that. So we ended up just having a time traveling around Scotland. And just so happened while we were in Scotland, it was the UCI World Championships cycling again. So
Another coincidence.
I
Hmm.
know, I don't know how he does this. It's just amazing. So
Yeah.
we went and free camped as much as we could in Scotland and
Mm.
watched the racing up in Scotland. And then once the cycling had finished, just spent 10 days travelling around the lochs and glens in Scotland.
Lovely. And then home. Was Flossie pleased to be home, or do you think she missed life on the road?
No, I think she was delighted to be at home. I
Yeah.
think she's a proper home bird. So it was I think she breathed a sigh of relief. It's like, oh good, we're back now. Maybe this is it. And then when we decided we went back to Spain, we actually left Flossie at home that
Yeah.
time.
She had a little break at home.
Yeah.
How did it feel for you to be back after all of your adventures? How was the homecoming for you?
So when we first got home, I must admit I got a bit stir crazy. It was like, no, I don't want to be here. I want to be out. I want to be in the van. I don't want to be in these four
Mm,
walls, and hence
yeah,
the trip back up to Scotland. Um, and even though I knew that we'd still got the second trip planned to go to Spain, we weren't actually at home
mm.
for very long. So we spent as much time as we could away out in the van.
You got the bug.
Yes, got the
Yeah.
bug. But believe it or believe it not, we've not been out in her since we got home.
Okay. Hmm. Would you do it again? Is this the kind of adventure you would plan to do
I
again?
would. I think it would be one of those things that would have to wait until I was retired. Um,
Mm,
I feel extremely privileged that I was able to take that time out of work. And it was only down to actually receiving some inheritance money that I was able to go and do the trip.
yeah.
So I think the next time we did it, it would be something that I would do once I'd retired.
Yeah. Yeah. When you look back over that period, what was the best thing about it for you?
The time out, I think, the
Mm,
time away. I've worked since I was 17. Um, and I think I've never had that kind of extended break. I've not had children. I've always had dogs instead of kids. So I think just being able to take that time out and recharge and reset especially after the year I'd had previously.
Very well deserved break.
Thank you.
Mel, that was fantastic to hear about. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and yeah, bring on retirement, hey, and another adventure, but not too soon.
Not too soon, no.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for asking
Thanks,
me.
Mel.